show experience. We've just encountered the longest off-season in all of fantasy sports. 1 week, we're back. PGA season restarts right now. It's now the 2018 season for the PGA Tour, Safeway Open, and this is really nice because throughout the playoffs, we dealt with 2 no-cut events, and then there was a limited field in Boston, and then even just the Northern Trust Open, 125 players. The cut isn't really all that real. We're back to a almost full field event. It's 144 players in the field this week. Top 70 in ties make the cut. We have a brand new wave of Webb.com Tour graduates coming into the field this week. And I always forget this, that every single season, the Safeway, formerly the Fries.com Open, great name for a tournament, by the way, actually features some legitimate names in it before we get deeper into the swing season. Then you just literally have nobodies playing on tour. So this is a good one to get back in on. It's nice to see some of the familiar names that we've been taking all summer long, like all of our sleeper picks. Now they're all like $12,000, so it's kind of crazy to think about that. So to break down the entire field with me, to make some picks, and to get caught up on some of these good Webb.com guys, it's Jeff Bergerson from FantasyGolfInsider.com. What's going on, man?
Not too much, Pat. I'm excited. Not a lot of the big names in the field, like you said, but
there's enough.
We love the fall season.
There is enough. I mean, this happens every single year. The past 2 swing seasons, I've done amazing. Way better than I do during the normal run of the year when everyone has all the information, everyone knows. This is a huge advantage to anyone who pays attention to golf to know some of these lower end guys and really evaluate sleepers, because during the course of the regular season, I mean, when you're playing at Riviera or even in the bigger events like the Masters, the WGC, everyone knows the same guys that are undervalued. This is like a 6-week period where we can get in on some players that no one else knows about, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's the biggest edge that we have. And momentum is huge now. Guys are coming in off the Webb.com playoffs, playing hot. We've seen it come into play before. We saw Emiliano Grillo a couple years ago stay hot from the playoffs and roll and win this event early on. And we've seen it several times now where guys continue the momentum. They're owned by virtually nobody in the GPPs or cash games, and they end up doing really well in this PGA event.
All right, so well, I would say before we get to the top end guys, let's just shoot right for those guys. Who are some of the Webb.com grads or maybe lower price players that we should be paying attention to?
Sure, I'll give you a few. I list everyone in my article, all the newcomers on tour that I really like this year that I'm going to be targeting. What I'm going to do, Pat, and what my strategy has been the last few years in GPPs, if you're building a lot of lineups, if you're building 20, 30, 40 lineups, what I would do is lock in some of those really good players up top and then mix in the Webb.com guys that nobody knows who have low ownership. We don't know exactly how their skills are going to translate to the PGA Tour. It's a whole different animal. But taking an exposure to a bunch of them, say maybe 10 Webb.com guys and owning them maybe 20, 25% is going to give you good exposure to guys who are going to be owned by 5% and under. And a lot of them are going to make the cut and some of them are going to pop. And I like that rather than going with other guys who we know well, who have been on the PGA Tour forever. You kind of know what you're getting. I think of guys like Daniel Summerhays or Chad Campbell. We know what we're getting with those guys. Limited upside, and they'll have some owners because of people know who they are, have some tournament history, whatever. I just assume go with some of these Webb.com guys and give them a shot early. One guy that I'm looking at is Rob Oppenheim. Right, he's at 7,600 this week. We saw him in some PGA events last season, but he spent most of his time on the Webb.com tour. He finished up really strong in his last 12 events. He had 9 top 20s with top 5s in the championship, in the DAP championship and tour championship, the last 2 events. So he has a lot of momentum coming into this event. Another guy is Denny McCarthy. He's at 7,500. He's a really strong putter, not a great ball striker. Finished with top 20s in his last 3 events. Nobody's going to own him. Who else do I got here? Nate Lashley. You familiar with his story, Pat, at all?
I am not. Is he Bobby Lashley's brother?
No, I don't think so. When he was in college, and he's an older guy, I think he's in his 30s, but when he was in college, he was playing in an event, and his folks and his girlfriend came to watch him. It was out west, and after the event, they flew home, and they never made it back.
Oh, wow.
The plane crashed, and they all died. So he is, that's just an incredible story that I read about. And I'd check it out too, because there's more to it. But last year, or 2 years ago, he was on the Latin American tour. Last year, he qualified for the Webb.com, and he had a really good season. He doesn't do anything spectacular. He's just really consistent. He had 12 top 25s and 5 top 10s in 23 events. He withdrew from the Tour Championship. But so did a lot of guys, because if you weren't following it, it got suspended from Sunday to Monday because they had storms and weather. And a lot of the guys who had already qualified for the PGA Tour just withdrew. They didn't want to mess with it. So disregard that withdrawal, because he was playing actually pretty well in that event. But he's a guy I'm going to be targeting probably quite a bit in the fall as well as this week, and he's 7,200.
All right, well, let's talk about the course a little bit. Silverado Resort, it's now the 4th year that the Safeway Open has been held at this venue. A lot of trees along the fairways. There's a lot of laying up that goes on off the tee, so even if you have your Tony Finau's or your long hitters, they're probably going to end up clubbing down and improving their accuracy a little bit. 2 of the par 5s are very gettable this week, and when I look at my key stats, and I built my model at fantasynational.com, which no longer free, you got to sign up for it. Still a great service if you want to go use it. And I filtered everything in. The big 5 that I really focused on this week were greens and regulation was one. Strokes gained approach was probably the most important one when you ran correlation numbers from this. Strokes gained beyond 200 yards on proximity. It seems like 150 to 175 and beyond 200 yards are really the key iron areas this week. When you go back and look at the former winners, even Steele, Bay, and Emiliano Grillo, that they're all really good from that 200-yard range. And I think that's going to translate this week where so many birdies are going to be made. I threw par 5 birdies or better onto this list too, because there's 4 of them. You always have to figure that out. And then the final one, strokes gained off the tee. I don't want guys hitting the ball in the woods or putting themselves into bad spots. Obviously, driving distance is one thing, but we've seen players like Kevin Na, who's been super consistent at this course over the years, continue to get it done and churn out quality results despite not being the longest hitter on the tee, but he does consistently gain strokes at this course off the tee. So those are the 5 that I'm looking at. Would you add anything to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, scorers, all the par 5s are reachable, so we're looking for scores. Guy, I like the birdie or better on the par 5s that you included. I think you covered most of the ones that I'm looking at, Pat.
All right, so let's go to the very top, because this is where we're going to have to make more of these choices. Like Jeff pointed out, that you can mix and match a lot at the bottom if you're playing multiple lineups, like the 20-entry max on DraftKings right now. I mean, that's a good one to play. It's $4. You can spend $80 to play it, and you can get a good feel for how to figure out how to play multiple lineups, how to set your exposures. And I know that there's a lineup generator at fantasynational.com that makes everything really easy. FantasyGolfInsider.com, also with a product very much in the same way. Jeff, can you explain how your guys' lineup generator works a little bit?
Yeah, basically we can set whatever parameters we want as far as where we want our lineups to end up salary-wise. So do you want it to go all the way to $50,000, or do you want to have some money left on the table? You can set your parameters and then put your weightings on every player that you want exposure to, and it's going to generate however many lineups you want. And you just export it really easily and right into DraftKings, load them and enter the contest. It's really, really slick.
Yeah, it's a super easy way to save time, because as someone who used to do it by hand every single time and try to keep track of my exposure that way, it took hours to try to build 20 lineups and make sure I had the right guys with the right guys. This way, if you use the lineup generator at FantasyGolfInsider.com or at Fantasy National, you can actually swap players in and out after you build the lineups. If you feel you have too much exposure after you run the generator, you can allocate your exposure a little bit more evenly if you like. So that's another great tool that you can use there. So at the top, if we're going to really nail down this core and figure it out, number 1 in terms of pricing is Tony Finau, and he's $11,500. Gone are the days of $6,900 Tony Finau. We're in the swing season right now. He's followed by Webb Simpson, Phil Mickelson, Zach Johnson. That is your above $10,000 range. Then into Bill Haas, Ryan Moore, Kevin Na, Keegan Bradley, Lucas Glover, and then Brendan Steele, who's the defending champion, at $9,000. When your eyes look at this sheet, to me, I mean, I like Finau a lot, but that seems super pricey. And I don't know if I'm really digging Webb, Zach, or Webb Simpson here. I think the move might be to drop down a little bit and target some of these like upper $8,000, lower $9,000 guys.
Yeah, if I were to target two guys in this upper tier, it would be Finau and Simpson, just because they've been playing lately and they've been playing really well. But outside of those two, I do like dropping down past probably 9,300. I like Keegan in that area. Um, Ches Reavie is a guy who I really like at 8,900 this week. I think he's a little bit underpriced. He hasn't missed a cut in forever, so we get a high floor, but he also has two top 12s in the FedEx Cup playoffs lately with the big boys, so we get a real high ceiling with him as well. So I'll be dropping down mostly. I will have exposure to Finau and Simpson up top, though.
Is it because of the approach game with Webb Simpson right now, where he just seems very dialed in with his irons?
Absolutely. Yeah, and his putter, which is, it's become a trend, I guess. We have to say, because he has been putting well for 6 months now since he switched. So no longer can we say Webb Simpson is just going to lose it on the greens, I guess. So I like him. And Finau, a lot of people think of him as real volatile, but he hasn't missed a cut since the Players. So we're getting a high floor with him as well. And he did have those two top tens in his last two events in the FedEx Cup playoffs. Plus, he's played well on some California tracks. He had a T4 at Farmers last year, T23 at Pebble, both on POA. So I do like Finau up top. What I don't like is this price, because then you have to drop down in the mid sevens for the average price for the rest of your lineup. And I think it's going to be tough to identify five guys down there that are going to both make the cut and finish reasonably. So I'm not going to have a huge exposure to Finau, probably about 20%, I would say.
What do you do with someone like Bill Haas, who has 3 wins in California? Obviously, he likes the POA putting surfaces as well, and he always kind of does his biggest damage in weaker fields. And I mean, I just listed you the top 10 players. I mean, this is not the top 10 in the world ranking showing up to the Safeway Open. Is Bill Haas someone to start a cash team with, or would you even consider him in GPPs at all?
I generally don't go with Bill Haas in GPPs just because his upside is so very limited. He very rarely makes you value, especially when he's up in the top 5 or 6 guys' price. Now, I like Bill Haas a little bit more when he's 7K, and a T22 or a T30 is perfectly acceptable. I won't be owning him this week, and I won't be owning him when he's up in this top tier of pricing, just because he rarely, if ever, really makes you pay by fading him.
The last guy I wanted to point out was Kevin Na. I would expect him to be one of the highest owned players of the week based on his track record at Silverado. He started to come around a little bit as the season came to its conclusion. Is he someone to actually give a chalk or not? Is he just someone to go in on?
I really dislike Kevin Na, just overall as a player in general. But, yeah, a lot of things line up for this week. He's high in our model. He has the tournament history. He's been playing well, 2 top 10s in his last 4 events played. Consistent. He'll line up statistically like you had mentioned before. I'm undecided on him. How does that sound, Ben?
Yeah, he's a tricky one to figure out because you know that the ownership is going to be there for him, that you would really have to go overweight to the field to, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be 25% owned, but I'd probably say like 17 to 20, somewhere in that range. And you can check out my column up on dkplaybook.com, the entire cheat sheet, and it'll have projected ownership later in the week and some of the pivot plays in that range. I think for cash, he's fine. Like if you want Haas, Na, and cash, I mean, it's it's pretty safe. But like you mentioned with Haas, I think Na could somewhat be the same way that, it could limit the upside that you have. But I think starting in that price range is something that I really want to do if I can't figure out where I want to go in the mid $7,000 area. So let's drop below the $9,000 threshold and start talking about the sub-Brendan Steele area. And then we start getting to a few of my favorites down here. So Ches Reavie, who you mentioned, is 89. Uline is 88. Lovemark, 87. Party Marty Laird, 8,600. Emiliano Grillo, former winner of this event, 8,500. Cauley, can't putt on POA, 84. Ollie Schneider-Jans, Kevin Tway, Chesson Hadley, Harold Varner, Harris English, and that's your $8,000 range. Luke List is 7,900. We'll get to Luke List in a second, but if Peter Uihlein doesn't bomb the ball into the woods on every hole, he should be setting up pretty well here, shouldn't he?
He will, and I wouldn't think his ownership will be too high. He's a good GPP type player. He's got high upside, also has a pretty low floor as well. He misses quite a few cuts, but I'm not quite sure what his ownership will be like. Depends. I'd guess probably 12 to 15%, I'm guessing. And his price was a little bit higher than I thought it was going to be. I thought he was going to be lower 8s this week, but I'm okay with him. I kind of like this range. I know you're going to like Jamie Lovemark this week, right?
Who wouldn't love Jamie Lovemark, the California kid in California? I mean, this is when, like, Jamie Lovemark seems like he's been on the fringe of a win for so long. Like, statistically, he's lined up really well at certain events. He's churned out a lot of top tens. We know he can bomb it. When he's on, he can actually putt and chip quite well. And the pedigree that comes along with Jamie Lovemark, you put him in a familiar setting, you put him at a course where he can take advantage of these par fives. Why wouldn't you like Jamie Lovemark?
I agree with you on him. And he's another guy like Finau. Like I mentioned, people think of him as highly volatile and missing cuts, but he's missed one cut since Honda. So
really, since Honda?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't one cut, and he's got some places that he's popped. He popped at Memorial, he popped at Greenbrier, so I'm okay with him even in cash games in this range.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, he's a better cash game play than Uline overall. I think both are probably similar in terms of talent. However, I really like to target some of the players that were really close during the actual season, during the swing season. We saw this with Kisner 2 years ago. He had like 3 second-place finishes, and then boom, he finally pops and wins. Brendan Steele, even last year, like he was getting close towards the end of the season, never quite came through, and then boom, he pops at Safeway. So Jamie Lovemark strikes me as one of those guys, and I think Patrick Rodgers is another one. I mean, Uline actually got a win on the Webb.com tour, and he's had the pedigree from the European side of things. But I think Lovemark is in a great situation over the course of the swing season, especially if Justin Thomas doesn't play in Kuala Lumpur, then he might have a shot there too.
I'm with you on Lovemark. I'll own quite a bit of him, Uline, Reavie, in this range.
All right, so what about someone like Bud Cauley? How much emphasis do you put on how players actually perform on POA surfaces versus Bermuda versus bent grass? Because someone I like is Ben Martin, who's only $7,000, just based on the way that he sets up with long irons in that 150 to 175 range. But he's been a disaster putting on POA over the years. Now, I think that $7,000 is enough to accept that risk, but is Bud Cauley too highly priced for a guy that generally just putts well on bent?
Yeah, I think he is too highly priced, and I won't own him in this area. Does have some upside. To answer your question, I do put some emphasis on putting surface, not as much as I do as statistics, current form, and tournament history, but I do take that into consideration because I look, if a guy totally stands out, and we saw this a couple of times toward the end of last season, where guys go back to bent or go to Bermuda, and they find their game again. So I think there is something to it, and I think it's definitely worth taking a look at because they don't play a lot on POA. And when they go out west, like an event like this, I think it could factor into it.
The only other guy in this range, I mean, I'm not going to have a ton of Chez Reavie like you. I think I'm going to allocate that exposure that you're going to have on him to my main man, Party Marty. Good with a long iron, putts well on POA. He should be good here. I like Party Marty. I think that he's sort of he's a classy guy in this field of youngsters.
So what do you think his ownership is going to be? Our guy Perry, who writes our preview columns, thinks he's going to be quite chalky.
Really?
I'm not sure about that.
I don't think so. Not right next to Jamie Lovemark, Grillo, and Cauley and Schneiderjans.
Right. I was wondering that too. I didn't originally have him as having ownership, but when he said that, I was like, oh, really? But then you mentioned him, so that'll increase it by about 5% now. So
yeah, but people know not to listen to me about Party Marty. Every time I go in on Party Marty, he ends up shooting like 20 over.
Yeah, he does. He does tend to bomb out sometimes.
I mean, listen, I don't think that he's a good cash play, but he's lingered in some of these bigger events. And when we saw Steele win here, I know Grillo came off the Webb.com tour and ended up winning, but I think that if you put everyone into a pressure cooker like this, that maybe with not a lot of people watching and it not being sort of a prestige event, that a youngster could come in and win it. I mean, we just saw Xander Schauffele win the Tour Championship, so maybe that's not even a thing. Maybe people deal with pressure differently. It doesn't matter who you are, but I think a guy who's won multiple events on the PGA Tour, who has a lot of experience and actually statistically fits this course very well, I think that would have to factor in a little bit for Laird.
Sure, yeah.
Last guy in this range, Ollie, in or out?
Out on Ollie.
Yeah, poor Ollie, man. But he kind of fits the criteria of sort of the guy that I was talking about who came so close so many times, didn't get it done, and now he's in a weaker spot. I mean, what if Patrick Cantlay was in this field? Would he be the highest priced player?
The highest priced?
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't be that. He might be the highest owned. He wouldn't be the highest priced. He'd probably be at 10K.
That's kind of crazy. Oh, we didn't even really bring up Phil. Phil's been playing better.
He has been. He got a little momentum coming off the President's Cup. I I won't be owning him.
Yeah, I won't either. I so rarely own. Phil's a good own when he's like $7,400.
Right.
The 10 plus K Phil is kind of terrifying. All right, so let's talk Luke List. He's $7,900. He is my. It doesn't matter what model I run. All my key stats, I can change the key stats. It spits out Luke List, either the number 1 or the number 2 guy. Every time this happens, it turns out so poorly. I figure Luke List will be the highest owned player on this slate. I don't care. I think he's going to win, so I'm all in on Luke List.
You think he's going to be the highest owned overall player?
Yeah, I mean, he's such a good price, and you know everyone's going to... Anyone who runs a model whatsoever or just pays attention to golf, like the DFS community loves Luke List to begin with, and then anyone who uses any sort of analytics, and like, when you ran your model, where did Luke List come out?
Yeah, he's up top.
Yeah, he's on top of mine, too. Like, doesn't this have just a recipe for... Like, if you want to fade him in GPPs and just hope it goes poorly, I think that's actually a viable strategy, but I will be going all in on him.
Yeah, I definitely have him as in my core, and I will have exposure to. Played really well last fall season too, so maybe he's just a super good fall season guy. Because during the regular season, he had a couple good showings. Where was it? Houston? I think it was Houston. He was top 10.
Did he really only have one top 10? For a guy we talked about every single week.
Yeah, outside of the fall season, I believe that was his only top 10 because he had a few in the fall season, I believe, maybe just a couple. But yeah, I will have exposure to List. I just think he's a great scorer. DK points, he'll score on the par fives. We could see a couple eagles out of him, which would be monstrous during the 4 days. So I will have ownership to List. But like you say, if you think he's going to be owned by 25+% possibly, then you could always fade him because he is combustible, that's for sure.
He is, but the one good thing, the reason that he should be highly owned at this price at $7,900, he's like the 21st or 22nd highest priced player. Even if he comes T25 this week, and that's his result, his DraftKings scoring could be top 10.
Oh, yeah. If he comes top 25, you'd be okay with that, definitely, at $7,900 for sure.
Yeah, his DK point performance, based on the way that he scores, is always higher than his actual finishing position. So that's something to keep in mind. You mentioned the Eagle rate, best on tour. Like, that's not something to scoff at. That's a lot of DraftKings points.
Absolutely.
All right, so the rest of this $7,000 area, you mentioned some of the Webb.com guys. What about someone like DeChambeau or Mackenzie Hughes, who's hitting his long irons really well right now, got a win during the swing season last year? Is there anyone that really pops to you in the 7K range?
Well, a guy like Keith Mitchell is new to the tour. I like him in this area. Seamus Powers at 7,400. He had been playing well for a while. I like going with those guys as opposed to like a David Hearn or Smiley Kaufman or even a Graham DeLette.
Oh, no. This is Graham's time. I'm actually in he's 80-1. I couldn't help myself.
7,500. That's so crazy.
That's a really good price for him at this event. I don't know if he's completely... I figure he's completely healthy now after the withdrawal and then him coming back, and like he kind of got out of sorts a little bit towards the end of the playoffs, but like he was in the middle of a really good run for a while.
Yeah, that's not a bad price for a GPP flyer on him, that's for sure.
I would use him in cash.
I would not use him in cash.
But doesn't he kind of fit the mold of the player that you're looking for here? Good ball striker, good with long irons. I mean, he actually putted well last year, which is shocking.
Yeah, no, I agree. Statistically, he lines up good, and I think he's legitimate. But trustworthy. He's not trustworthy for cash. He misses way too many cuts.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes he's forced to chip, and that becomes problematic.
It brings his yips to the course.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, there was at Heritage. It was funny because everyone was like, "Oh, DeLette can't lose this. He's up by so much." Like DeLette had through 3 rounds at Heritage, I think he had only missed 1 green in regulation. I was like, well, "What happens if he misses more than 1 green in regulation in this final round? He's gonna blow up." And it happened. He like 3 chipped 1 green. It was ridiculous.
That's right. I love playing. I play golf with my uncle, and he's got the yips too, and he's always back and forth over the green. It's hilarious to watch. And DeLette's very much like that.
I'm targeting Patrick Rodgers down here as well. I think that he's underpriced for his potential.
Fair enough. I can hear that. How about Martin Flores at 7,600? He's one of the hotter players, or was the last couple of months. Took 34th at Northern Trust, but then before that he had 4 straight top 20s.
Yeah, he got himself into the playoffs with his hot play. I don't know. I can never get a read on fake Party Marty.
I think he's reasonable at 7,600. There aren't a lot to choose from down here outside of the newer guys on tour. How about he's back now.
Sang Moon Bay?
He's back, yeah, after his service for his country. He won this event, as you mentioned before. We don't know exactly what to expect from him, but he was really good before he left.
Yeah, he was excellent. And it kind of sucked for him. That, I mean, do you think, is this going to happen to Siwoo Kim as well?
Good question. I don't know. And I don't know why there isn't some sort of stipulation in their country that could allow him to push his service back a little bit, because he's only got so many prime earning years. I don't know why they don't do that, but they don't. So, but we'll see if that cost him his career or not, if he can somehow bounce back. I heard that he has been playing golf on his military leave, so we'll see if it affects him or not.
I mean, I think his upside is high enough that, I mean, cash, obviously, no chance. But, like, if you played 20 lineups and used him in 2, I don't think that's unreasonable.
No, not at all. I'm rooting for the guy. I hope he can somehow bounce back.
Well, I mean, you're rooting for him, but you're rooting harder for Grayson Murray at 7,100, aren't you?
Yeah, I do like Grayson.
I like Grayson, too.
I think that price is bizarre down at 7,100, because he was playing really well toward the end of the season. I had him in my court just about every week, and he paid off value a lot.
Well, it was funny. There was a point during last season where we started getting Grayson at like 73, 74, and it's like he's hilariously underpriced. He's like $1,500 underpriced. A lot like Luke List, he can score. Like DraftKings points-wise will always be better than his performance as well. And like he's being priced right now the same as he was in good fields last year.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And he's got, a ton of upside. He won at Barbasol. Huge scorer, and nobody ever owned him last season.
Well, people hate him.
He probably won't, he won't be owned this season either, probably.
Well, people hate his guts, so they don't want to use him. It was like when Poulter got hot last year. He was like free money. You could print free money in your lineups just by using Ian Poulter for like 8 straight weeks, because people hate Ian Poulter so much they refuse to use him.
That's true. People let their emotions dictate their picks.
Yeah, and Grayson Murray, I mean, setup for this field seems perfect. I mean, he's also a highly volatile guy, but for $7,100, like, I'm in on that. I mentioned Ben Martin. I think he's worth a flyer. He's at $7,000. Oh, I didn't even realize John Daly's in the field. Are you taking him?
Nope. One interesting guy at 7,100. We followed him a bit at Aaron Hills. Is Maverick McNeely. He played college at Stanford. He's played some PGA events. Never done that much, but if he's the son of billionaire businessman Scott McNeely, and he had to choose between being a business mogul or a professional golfer, and he chose golf.
Of course,
would you choose the same path?
Yeah, who wouldn't do that? I mean, put it this way: if his golf career flames out, I'm sure he can go back to being a business mogul.
That's right. Yep.
The lifestyle of the golfer seems like a very good one.
If those are your two choices, you pretty much probably can't go wrong.
Well, another guy who's right in that area who just killed the West Coast last year is J.J. Spawn. I know he hasn't been playing all that well, but now that we're back on the West Coast, you just go with J.J. Spawn again?
Yeah, I suppose you could. In GPPs, definitely played well at Farmers, will putt well on POA. I'm okay with J.J. Spawn in that area as well.
Is there anyone else down below the $7,000 area that you think deserves our attention for GPPs?
Not really.
Okay.
You mentioned Ben Martin. I'll have a little bit of exposure to him. Abraham Answers at 69. I'll own maybe 5 to 10% on him. No one will own him, but he's new to the PGA Tour. We've seen him a couple times, but he's got high upside, just a very low floor, so just a GPP type flyer.
What about someone like Kelly Kraft, who we've seen get hot for spurts? He just seems, after having a decent year on tour, it seems odd that he's this lowly priced. It's like Grayson at the same time. Like, I don't get why they're this lowly priced as opposed to like Sam Saunders kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think Kelly Kraft, if you want exposure, 5-8%. If you're doing a lot of lineups, if you're doing one, I probably wouldn't do it. But if you want a little exposure to a guy who does have some upside, he had a couple good finishes last year. I think one was Dean and DeLuca. I don't remember what the other one was. Yeah, I mean, definite upside and no ownership down in this range. If there's a guy that you identify that you like, have some exposure to him. He can't, he's probably not going to hurt you too bad if you only own him on a couple lineups.
The most devastating thing that my model churned out for me was Matt Every being so close to the top every single time. Like, do I just not trust that? But like, he's not playing poorly. He's only $6,700, and we know he can win tournaments.
Yeah, have you looked at his putting splits at all?
Between Bermuda and Poa?
Yeah,
No, not in depth.
I couldn't tell you offhand how I just I would think that he probably favors heavily on Bermuda, but I don't know for sure, and I haven't looked at it.
Let's see. Where has he putted poorly? I mean, the thing is, since he's kind of hit this hot streak, it's his approach game that's been lights out. Like he putted really well at the Canadian Open, and then he was like losing strokes putting kind of before that. Then he started putting really well on bent grass at the Travelers in St. Jude. So it's really bizarre.
Interesting.
Yeah, like he's gained strokes on approach over 2 in 3 of his last 5. He's gained strokes in 3 straight. He's gaining strokes off the tee right now. I mean, if that's the case, then he only needs to gain a few strokes putting, and he's kind of in this. And we know he starts hot. It's just really weird that no matter what I run, it keeps spitting him out to me. And I mean, I found it terrifying because it's Matt Every, and we know Matt Every, but maybe he got over whatever the problem was. And there wasn't. I mean, he won the Arnold Palmer Invitational 2 years in a row, but it's not like he was crap, before and after that. He had played well for a little stretch, and then he kind of went in the tank. Maybe, unlike Brendan Todd, he's coming out of it now.
Could be. I probably won't own him this week. I'll dive into him a little bit farther to see. I just haven't looked at him that closely. He's just a guy that I probably never owned him, Pat, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I cashed out big on him at Arnold Palmer one year, the first year he won the event. That was a big one for me. Good hit, one of my first big hits. And when I ran the model over the past 36 rounds, 24 rounds, 12 rounds at fantasynational.com, looking at 24 right now, in this field, Matt Every is 5th in terms of 150 to 175 proximity gained, and then he's 9th in 200 plus proximity gained over that range. Like, I just found that really surprising.
What ownership exposure will you have to him, do you think?
I probably only need 10%.
Sure. Yeah, and then you'd be far overweight the field. Yeah.
And
it's reasonable.
And like if I mix him in and I mix Kraft in and maybe I'll take Answer as well, if I can start using, 2 lineups out of 20 apiece kind of thing, then I can start affording Tony Finau a little bit easier. And I don't, maybe I can afford Finau and one of those $8,000 guys if I use one of those 3 and mix and match that way. So that's something that I'm interested in doing. I mean, I've found that my eyes can lie to me. I found the model can lie to you. You really kind of have to really kind of feel your way through these things. But sometimes, it's like Keegan last year. No one wanted to play Keegan despite the fact that he popped for everyone every single week. And then it finally worked. Keegan started playing really well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
another guy you might want a little bit of exposure to down here that I just saw was Aaron Wise. Won the NCAA championship in 2016. I actually wrote him up last year in my Crystal Ball article. We just didn't see him a whole lot. I think he's got a huge upside, and he's going to be really good. I just don't know exactly when. He's only 21 years old. But he's a guy to kind of watch out for to see if we start to see him trending in the right direction to probably get on board because he's got a ton of talent.
Yeah, and I mean, he made both cuts at Career Builder and Farmers last season when he played on tour, and then we didn't see him again for a while. How did he do on the Webb.com tour last year?
He did pretty well, actually.
All right. So, yeah. I mean, again, like you mentioned off the top of the show, mixing and matching these guys at the bottom is the best way if you can concentrate your core at the top. And then, boom, you're looking pretty good. If 1 or 2 of these guys kind of pops up with a T15 or, God forbid, a win, something like that, then you're dancing. You're in the money.
That's right.
All right. Jeff Bergerson. Check him out on Twitter at Fantasy Golfers. And, Jeff, let everyone know what you guys are doing outside of golf at fantasygolfinsider.com over the course of the swing season.
Yeah, so golf is our number one thing, and we crush it in the fall, so I recommend everyone plays it. But for those we know might have some interest in that other sport, we're doing a lot of football coverage. We got a lineup generator, we got projections, we got articles, both a GPP and a cash game article. Just for those loyal FGI members, we're not charging anything for it. Anyone who signs up for the golf package gets football too. We just want to say thank you for being loyal members. Stick with us during the fall as the contests aren't as big on DraftKings. And, so we're doing tons of football. But we also got tons of articles like previewing next season and everything coming out, too. So there's always content every week. We come out with a lot of stuff. So check us out.
Well, as a member of the Fantasy Golf Insider crew, I like having my package. They're great reads every single week, so I think everyone should go check that. Are you guys going to update your GPP strategy article?
Yes, we are going to do that. Zach does that every fall after the season wraps up with the new numbers, and I think there's going to be some interesting findings this year. it's been a little bit different. We've seen this in the last few years. Trends definitely take shape in this industry. The DFS golf world has changed dramatically from when we started about 4 years ago, Pat, and you were one of the pioneers. So you know how much it's changed, how much information is out there now compared to back then when you were the only one doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it was much easier for me, Bayo, 3.5 years ago when I just win every single cash game every single week. Now I just lose them all the time. It sucks.
That's right.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter at @ThePME. Remember, subscribe to FantasyNational.com. Lineup generator, custom model, rolling stats. You can separate by any player and dig into all the course history compared to correlation courses. It's the #1 stat tool resource you can find on the web. If you're serious about fantasy golf, I would recommend going to check that out right now. You can find my entire cheat sheet up on DKPlaybook.com. And if you like the old wagering, check out Facebook.com/ThePME. I'll have some of my best plays up on there as well. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. Good luck this week. I'll see you next time.